Hello, in this video we will learn how to create and design a repeater control in your SharePoint forms, to use to store data, and integrated lists together. We will learn how to apply calculations dynamically for these data, by adding mathematical formulas on rows, and how to create dynamic rows counter. We will see how you can use the repeater also, to display large data, and apply the paging feature for it, using Spark Forms Builder. Let's first see how to use the repeater control, to store data and integrate lists together. The repeater control represents repeating sections, containing groups of controls that may need to be duplicated. You only need to set up the controls once, and you will view them at runtime as one row, which can be replicated when users click the Add Item icon in the repeater. In each column in the repeater, you can create a summary that performs various functions, such as counting the number of items, or calculating the totals of values for each row. In the beginning, I created two lists as we see here, the invoice list, and the invoice items list, one for the basic information, and the other for the details of the items. And we are going to store the invoice data in these two lists. Let's create a repeater control, to the invoice form. From the list at the top, click on Spark Forms Builder to open the canvas to design the form. As you see here, I've previously designed this form, to add the repeater control in it. If you are interested in how to customize the design for the form in detail, you can watch the tutorial video listed in the description below. From the Toolbox panel, under Container, drag and drop the repeater control. Now we are going to add controls in repeater. First, we are going to add a text box control for the item number. Modify the control properties. And choose the control as number only. And make it read only. Add another text box control for the description field. And a currency control for the unit price field. Choose the unmapped source. Then select the currency format to bind the input control with. Now we are going to add text box controls for the quantity, and the discount fields. And another currency control for the total field. After creating the repeater control, we have to configure it. Modify the repeater control properties. As we see here, row menu, when clicking this button, will show a dialog to manage the row actions menu items. You can show or hide, sort them out, and change their captions text. Now we are going to map the repeater with the SharePoint list, to store the controls values automatically in it. If you select unmapped source, the repeater's data will not be saved automatically anywhere. The data of the controls inside the repeater should be generated and saved based on a custom rule functions that you create in order to solve a specific case, and you can consider it as a complete user custom way to control the repeater behavior freely. But I am going to select mapped source. You can map the repeater with a column or list. If you mapped it with a column, all the repeater's values will be stored as an XML string in the current item column. We are going to select mapping or integrate it with another list. As we use the repeater to store the item's details in the invoice items list. So let's select the list in which we want to store the data in it. And here specify the operation, read and write in the list, to add new items, and also read to retrieve the data for editing later. Select the master ID invoice ID. Then map the form controls with the related list columns. Then click on OK. OK, after configuring the repeater, let's design and customize it to be more user-friendly. First, we are going to add a header for the repeater and headers labels. From the Toolbox panel, under Container, drag and drop the panel control. Modify the control properties. Then drag and drop labels for the header labels. Modify each label to represent the repeater control under it. You can divide the repeater by adding vertical and horizontal lines. You can do further customization with the Advanced Style tool. You can change the borders and outline, background color. We can apply more advanced customization on our repeater, like adding a row number dynamically for each row, by using the getRepeaterRow function. First, select the row number control to add a rule and function for it. From the top ribbon, click on the control rules. Create a new rule. Modify the rule name. Select rule type action. And apply the rule on key up. In the action text box, we are going to use the setValue function to set row number value to the selected control. From the right panels, under Functions, at the search box type setValue. And here it is. You can have more details about the function from here. As we see here, this function needs two parameters: the control ID, which represents the selected control, and the values that we want to get it, by using the getRepeaterRow function. Select the control ID, row number, and then the value that we are going to get by using the getRepeaterRow. So again, from the right panel function, search for getRepeaterRow, and here it is. I am going with the wizard. The Case Manager wizard window will open. Select Repeater ID. Then click on OK. Then click Save. And now, each time we add an item to the repeater control, it will create the row ID for it dynamically. As I mentioned before, we can apply calculations dynamically for the data in the repeater, like calculating totals by adding mathematical formulas on rows. You can calculate the total price for each item, and also the sum total price for all the items. Let's start to calculate the total price value for each item in the repeater control. This value depends on the item price, quantity, and the discount. So we have to multiply the item price by the quantity, and subtract the discount value dynamically each time we add an item. To apply this equation, we're going to use the math function. First, select the total price control to add a rule and function for it. From the top ribbon, create a new rule. Modify the rule name. Select rule type action. And apply the rule on key up. In the action text box, we are going to use the setValue function to set the calculated value to the selected control. From the right panels, search for setValue. And here it is. Let's add the function and set the parameters. Select the control ID, total price, and for the value that we are going to calculate it, we are going to use the math function. So again, from the right panel, search for math. And here it is. I am going to add them manually. Then type the mathematical formula. Then click Save. And now, each time we add an item in the repeater control, it will calculate the total price for it dynamically. Now we are going to calculate the total sum for all the items in the repeater control. Select the subtotal value control to add a rule and function for it. From the top ribbon, create a new rule. Modify the rule properties. In the action text box, again we are going to use the setValue function. So from the right panel, add the setValue function. Select the control ID, subtotal value. And then we are going to use the function getRepeaterSum. From the right panel function, search for getRepeaterSum. And here it is. I am going to use the wizard way this time. Select repeater ID, and select the control, total price. Then click OK. Then click Save. Let's now publish the form, and see how it works. Let's get back to our list. Click on New. As we see, here is the repeater that we have created and designed it. Here are the header and the labels. And here are the controls section. Let's enter some data in the repeater, and see how it will be calculated their total values. Here are the dynamic row numbers. Here is the total value for each row. And here is the total sum value for all the rows. Let's enter the other data quickly. And submit the form. As we see here, data have been stored in the invoice list. And in the invoice detail list. If you are interested in more details about applying calculation, you can watch the tutorial video listed in the description below. Okay, let's now talk about the other uses for the repeater. We can use it to display data. All we need is creating the repeater, as we did it before, and connect it with any data source to retrieve the data from. So back to the design mode. Select the repeater that we have here. Open the repeater configuration. Define the list. And select Read option for the operation, to retrieve an existing data. We can use Camel Query Builder to generate a Camel query. To filter data that we want to display in the repeater. For example, you can write a query to get all products of price, over $200. If you are interested in more details about creating Camel queries, you can watch the tutorial video listed in the description below. Okay, as we see here, we can apply paging for the repeater, especially if we have large data. Check Enable Paging. The new section will appear here to specify the rows per page numbers that the user can select from at runtime. Then mapping the repeater controls with the list columns. Let's preview our form now and see how it works. Here it is, the repeater, and the data have been retrieved. We can move between the pages. You can also change the paging theme from the repeater property. Back to the design mode. Choose any theme you like. We can also retrieve the data that we want to display in the repeater and filter it dynamically by creating a dynamic camel query and applying rules and functions to the repeater. As we see here, we are going to display data from the order list in the repeater according to the selected salesperson. So back to the design mode. Select the salesperson people picker control. Create a new rule. Modify the rule name. Select rule type action. And apply the rule on change. In the action text box, search for populate repeater from list function. From the right panels under functions. And here it is. You can have more details about the function from here. Let's select the wizard way to add the function. Select repeater ID. Type site path. Select site list, orders, which we want to retrieve the data from. Then click on Next. Click on Generate Camel Query. To add a filter to retrieve the data based on the salesperson. From the orders list, I'm going to select the salesperson ID, to compare with the salesperson people picker control. Select the columns that want to retrieve them. Click on Insert. And then click on Next. Now we are going to map the listed repeater controls with their list columns. And click OK. And here we are, the function is done. This function will retrieve all the data for the selected salesperson. Then click Save. Let's now publish the form, and see how it works. As we see here, the salesperson Mike. And here we are, all the orders data have been retrieved in the repeater. Let's select another salesperson. We just watched how it's easy to create and design a repeater, and how to apply a dynamic calculation to the repeater's values, and how to handle large data from other lists, using the paging feature in less than 2 minutes with Spark Forms Builder, and how you can retrieve and filter data in the repeater. Follow us to learn more about advances used for SharePoint and Spark Forms. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and if you have a comment, please write it down. Thank you.